If you're in the market for a new watch, chances are you've heard of Seiko. The Japanese juggernaut has been pumping out timepieces for over 100 years, and they're just as popular now as ever. In fact, it seems like they're releasing new models on a near daily basis. And while most of these are fairly decent, their ever-expanding catalogue has left me wondering, just what are the very best Seiko watches when it comes to pure value for money? Well, I've spent the last few months scouring the Seiko range to answer that very question, and today I'll be revealing my picks. 25 interesting Seikos that all bring something unique to the table without obliterating your bank account. I personally tried every single one of these, so I know they don't suck. All those I'm mentioning today will be linked in the video description, along with a link to our sponsor Daily Watch, without whom this video wouldn't have been possible, or should I say afforded. From the team behind the world's largest watch social media account, DailyWatch.co offers a curated assortment of high-quality wristwatch accessories. They've got customizable watch rolls, as well as unique stands and practical watch cases, several of which you'll see holding our Seikos throughout this video. My favorite product of theirs is the Cognac watch slide case, which is super compact and perfect for traveling, as you can probably tell. All products have a 2-year warranty, along with free worldwide shipping and returns. With over 20,000 worldwide customers and a really strong feedback score, it's a site you can trust. Head to dailywatch.co using the link in the video description while you've still got time before Christmas. Because you watch my channel, you can also get 15% off using my exclusive discount code BensWatchClub. Go grab yourself the perfect gift. Right then, we better get started. Seiko is probably best known for dive watches, boasting a wider selection than ever before. Unfortunately, many don't quite fit the theme of this video. Their entry-level divers aren't so entry-level in terms of cost these days, while the more premium alternatives are infamously susceptible to bezel misalignment, which can be incredibly annoying. The SRPD range of dive-style watches is one of the few sub-$400 options available today. These were controversially introduced a few years back as a more expensive replacement to the fan-favorite SKX line, but it's actually a pretty decent watch on its own. True, the downgraded 100-meter water resistance rating is a bummer, but the case finishing is better, the dials are much more detailed, and the movement has also been upgraded over its predecessor. This is very much a fashion-forward diver, evident by the enormous range of radical colors and variants available, with this SRPD 73 being a particular standout with its gradient dial and faux patina loop. With a 41mm bezel and 42.4mm width, it may sound massive. However, it's got a comparatively tiny 45.8mm lug-to-lug, making it wear a fair amount smaller. If you'd like to go smaller still, it may be worth opting for the newly released SKX Midi, which is essentially a downsized version of this same watch, with identical specs and performance. At just 37.5mm wide and with a 44mm lug-to-lug, it's a perfect match for thin wrists. The color roster for these isn't as developed yet, but there are a handful of options to pick from. Another viable budget option is the Seiko Turtle, and if you can find it, the Mini Turtle. Heralding from the Prospex range, these distinctive divers offer great presence without clunkily overhanging your wrist. Unlike the lower-rated SRPD divers, the Turtle watches offer the full 200-meter diver standard water rating, with screw-down crowns for extra peace of mind. At their regular retail price, these watches offer good value, though Chinese dive watch brands tend to offer better specs for less money. That said, simply due to the brand prestige, the resale value of these Seikos is far better. Unfortunately though, since we last featured the diminutive Mini Turtle, it seems to have been discontinued. As such, you may have to venture into the used market to get your hands on that one. If you're after a wide watch squeezed into a stout package, it may still be worth a punt. A category where Seiko shines is dress watches. They know how to design a sleek timepiece, and boy have I got some lesser known options for you to fawn over. The best dial I've encountered is probably that on the Presage Cocktail Time 39.5mm version, which I reviewed at the back end of last year. This blue version, nicknamed the Aviation, has a killer microscopic dial texture and blue sunburst, which comes alive in natural sunlight. The rest of the watch is middle of the road at best, but the swanky aesthetic and the neatly frosted handset help carry it clear of the pack. It's a versatile size already, though There are alternative versions of this cocktail time available in 40.5mm and 38.5mm if you'd prefer to shift to one side of the spectrum. It's quite slim for an automatic, which never hurts, though I'd probably factor in the cost of a third-party strap, as the included butterfly clasp with this one doesn't allow you to fine-tune the bracelet size. You have to move it in link-sized increments, which is pretty annoying. Something you won't have seen before is this, the SRK-050. Again, the build quality of this piece is pretty mid. When combined with the inclusion of a quartz movement, it feels very light in the hands, I must say. Unlike your mum taught you though, when it comes to dress watches, looks, well, they really are everything. This one has an awesome retro pocket watch vibe that helps it look far more expensive than the humble price tag. It looks a lot better than it feels. There are many watches with a comparable design that pull it off so well, and the super thin 8mm case allows this to slip under virtually any sleeve. By some miracle, despite the underwhelming case construction, I can confirm that this watch has a top-of-the-line sapphire crystal. We tested it. Goodness knows why this random quartz watch gets a sapphire crystal while some of the high-end stuff is stuck with hardlex, but I guess it's a boon for the SRK-050. The gold case does look great, the 5-bar water resistance is alright for a dress watch, and the black tipped crown is something you don't see every day either. From vintage-inspired to hip and stylish, we move to the SNE 520. This model featured in our best minimalist watches roundup, as it's got some interesting touches, such as the curved outer chapter ring, super thin hands, and sapphire crystal. In fact, while serviceable as a dress watch, this one functions rather well as an all-rounder, with a surprisingly high water resistance rating and a super practical solar-powered movement, providing accurate time without frequent battery changes. Unlike its equally good-looking predecessor, the SNE 479, the newer 520 also has a standard bracelet rather than an integrated one, so you can swap it out if you want to. While the version I looked at had an understated grey sunburst, you can instead purchase the SNE 525, which boasts a more vibrant blue dial, or even the SNE 529, which has a classic green and gold colour scheme. Overall, this watch is a fantastic underrated gem from Seiko, no doubt. Another underrated option is this, the SRPH89. This automatic comes in a similar dark green colour and is a staple in many jewellery stores, as well as a bestseller on Amazon, despite rarely featuring in social media content for some reason. While not listed as part of any specific range, the SRPH89 is a Presage level timepiece despite costing considerably less money. If anything, the case here feels better constructed with neater edges and cleaner polishing than the cocktail time watch I mentioned earlier, which can often retail for double the price. The dial is really nice too, with a clean sunburst that's tricky to convey on camera but looks pretty premium in person, though I wouldn't say it's quite as exuberant as those present on the Presage models. The SRPH89 isn't as sleek either, with a thicker bezel and chunkier profile, though the water resistance is higher at 10 bar, and the bracelet I'd say is marginally better too, with improved finishing and adjustability, though in terms of that last one, it's still not the greatest. It even carries over the half-frosted hands, a rare inclusion in a watch at this price, enhancing the watch's legibility and appearance. There's also what appears to be a quartz version of this watch in the form of the SUR 390 series. If you're after a super clean dress option, this is more than serviceable, as it even goes further down the minimalist path, doing away with all dial text outside of the logo. I personally lean more towards the previous watch, but if you're after a viable Daniel Wellington or fashion watch alternative, then this could be right up your alley. It's really thin at just 8.5mm, though the water resistance is a bit lower than the automatic at 5 bar. Both of these watches come in a range of other colours too, if these ones don't tickle your fancy. From a Presage pretender, we now move on to a Grand Seiko lookalike, which comes by way of this, the SUR 457. Now I got this one at a bargain price of under $200, and I can't promise that you'll get quite such a good deal. That's because this one is a limited edition model to celebrate the 140th anniversary of Seiko. I've seen a couple of reviews saying this watch is made of titanium, but no, they're wrong, this is just made of steel with a steel bracelet too. But it is a looker with a design reminiscent of some Grand Seiko models for a fraction of the price. While the dial does lack the intricate surface of the higher end pieces, it still has an extremely bright silver sunburst and a reflective blue rehaut. No one seems to know how to say that one, but it helps it catch the eye from a distance. Meanwhile, the case has a similar layout too, with a high polished bezel and chamfered flanks, which further the illusion. Unlike the higher end mechanicals and spring drives, the SUR 457 is really thin thanks to the compact quartz movement, though it's not packing any special features. Still, water resistance is good at 10 bar, as is the sapphire crystal. If you want a brief taster of that Grand Seiko coolness without jumping to a completely different brand or price bracket, this is probably the lowest priced entry point. It's worth knowing that this SUR series continues beyond this limited edition piece. In fact, there are a range of other dress watches under this same designation that offer the same Dauphine hand design in less exclusive colours. There are different sizes too, which is where the SUR 319 comes in. While the 457 was well suited to average and large arms at 40mm in diameter, similar to many other SUR models, the 319 is instead a mere 35.7mm, making it a really viable option for tiny wrists. Again, it has that popular Rolex Datejust-like case shape and a steel bracelet, just in a reduced package. While we're on the topic of Rolex lookalikes, we have to talk about the Seiko 5 SNXS series. Now, if you're after a carbon copy of the Datejust, these can be viable choices. They do stray into that everyday watch territory and look very similar to that luxury design at a glance. So if that's all you care about, then don't let me hold you back. These have received a lot of acclaim purely for this resemblance. Still, there are two reasons I'd think twice before pulling the trigger. First, there's the case. The one on the SNXS sucks. The finishing is rudimentary, and the case shape means the watch stands awkwardly high off the wrist. Second, the SNK 361 exists. The SNK 361 is similar to the SNXS in many ways, but I think is a slightly better choice. While the dial looks marginally less Rolex-y, the case shape is far nicer and more Rolex-like with thicker shoulders, if that's what you're looking for. Basically, it conforms to your arm way better and looks much more expensive. In a similar manner, there's an array of microscopic fives spread across the surface, giving this one a level of macro texture that you'll rarely see on any watch at this price. While online it looks underwhelming, in person, this one looks killer. And it comes in the same colors as the SNXS watches as well, so you can just go with whichever you want. Admittedly, neither are leaders on the spec sheet these days, with low water resistance and a relatively dated automatic movement. But their Hardlex crystal is better than standard mineral glass, meaning they're better than some rival brands. And in fact, yeah, they're both usually pretty cheap. They're also both 37mm, so they'll fit all but the largest of wrists. Another Seiko 5 worth highlighting is the SNKL45. For quite a while, this was one of my favourite Seiko 5 watches, and that's because it's like a budget version of the now discontinued but highly popular Sabo 33. It's got the same performance as the previous two watches, just with a sharper handset and a sleek black dial, and it shares that same good-looking case as the SNK 361. While that one's good, I'd say the most popular of these old-school Seiko 5s is still the SNKL23. This watch went viral all the way back in 2015 due to the unbelievably attractive, well-executed design for very little cash. The subtly striped outer ring proved especially popular, though the praise faded when the watch was discontinued a few years later. Luckily, Seiko revived the design a while ago, and you can now purchase this legendary budget beast once more. For how long? Nobody quite knows. Like the other Seiko 5s, this one is still quite small and only has run-of-the-mill specs by modern standards. But the design, it still really holds up. The crown on this one can also be compressed to such a degree that the whole watch looks almost perfectly symmetrical as well. My only real complaint with this one is the rather unnecessary lug gap between the case and strap, but aside from that, it's a watch that looks the part without the price tag. In other words, a perfect fit for this list. Another option that happily straddles between smart and casual is the SRPE series, which includes this, the SRPE 57. Known colloquially as the Dress KX, this is pretty much a Seiko SKX, or more accurately, its replacement, that SRPD model, with the rotating bezel substituted for a smooth one. Somehow it works quite well, and a few minor changes have allowed it to accommodate this switch rather effortlessly. I wouldn't say it was my favourite on this list, but it certainly has some of that Tudor Black Bay feel, and the sunburst blue dial on this variant is very striking as well. Just like the previous SRPD, the case finishing here is more than good enough, with an exhibition rear in case you want to see what's going on inside. This watch is known to be a bestseller, and it's a pretty easy way to add a sprinkle of sportiness to your wardrobe. But if you're after something flashier, then there's definitely another Seiko 5 worth considering. That's right, the SNK E56. All gold, all bling, and thanks to the compact size, it's not too gaudy either. I definitely have a soft spot for these gold watches. And while they aren't actually made of gold, it's basically a gold-colored coating, they can look fashionable in the right situations. The only thing to remember with these watches is that the scratches on that gold plating or coating they will appear more prominently than those on a normal silver-coloured case. If you don't quite fancy the design of this one, there's the comparable SNK 366, which is just an all-gold version of the impressive SNK 361 that I mentioned earlier. Perhaps my favourite everyday Seiko is the SNK 371. Boy, they don't make these code names easy to remember. This sporty watch has bundles of character thanks to the colourful 20-minute track down the top right edge, which looks like it was pulled straight out of Ridge Racer. R4 is just unbelievably fun, by the way. You have to try it, that soundtrack is phenomenal. Nerdiness aside, this watch stands out with its vibrant blue paint job and white arrow hour hand. It's also got perfectly proportioned numbers above each marker to coincide with the timing bar. Though counterintuitively, this watch isn't a chronograph in any way, so it's mainly just there for show. Still, I think this thing looks incredibly cool for the money, as do the white and black colorways, which use a red track instead. To my knowledge, this watch seems to be a recased SNKK27, which was also known as the Speed Racer, as both of these share an identical dial. The one I have here uses the same case as some of the Seikos mentioned earlier, whereas the SNKK27 is a tad larger instead, with a thicker bezel that brings it to 38.5mm. I think the one I have looks marginally sexier, but I'll let you decide. Rumor has it the better known Speed Racer is now discontinued despite being available still on some grey market sites, so I'd imagine this SNK 371 is probably in a similar boat. If there's one watch on this list that I'd urge you to try while you can, it'd be this one. Very glad I got to try it. It's awesome. Another awesome dial is present on the SUR 503. This is a radical departure from the previous SUR models I mentioned, with an extreme design that involves deep groove cutouts at the circumference and an aggressively angled case. Now, this watch has barely any reviews online. It seems nobody's discovered it yet, and boy are they missing out. Just look at this monster. It's got to be one of the most experimental dials that you can get for the money, with the aforementioned cutaway sections revealing a finely ribbed microtexture beneath. In natural light, this one looks great, and you can only tell with a super macro lens that these are even here. Even the hour markers have a vertically grooved surface, as well as a uniquely placed lume pip that's baked into the top half of the 12 index. I've never seen something quite like that before. Together with the glossy coating used towards the edges and the high polish on the hands, you're left with a deceptively high-end appearance despite the low cost. Powering the SUR 503 is just a simple quartz movement, and it's only rocking a Hardlex mineral crystal. The custom 22mm bracelet is also a little cumbersome on this 40mm watch, though it does provide somewhat of an integrated bracelet illusion without any restrictions. The shape and brushing are very well tailored to the main body, which itself is extremely well finished for an entry-level Seiko, far surpassing most others on this list. It's entirely brushed outside of the bezel, but it puts some of their other models to shame. Other colours are available, and some even have different bezels and straps, so we'll try to link to those that are available down below. Next up, Seiko's military-inspired watches. For years, there were two of these holding the fort on the budget end of things, the SNK 800 series and the SNZG series. The SNK 800 was your smaller field pilot hybrid, available for virtually no money, while the SNZG offered more water resistance and better low light performance in a larger 42mm package. Now, both of those watches have entry-level finishing, but if you can find them for the right price, they're still a solid choice. Nevertheless, prices for these have rocketed in the last couple of years, as they've effectively been displaced by the next generation of Seiko 5 models. While I reviewed one of those, the SRPG33, in a dedicated comparison video, I'd instead recommend opting for the far better looking SRP-H31. This pilot watch effectively reimagines the SNK 800 series with prettier visuals and improved finishing. The sword hands are a new addition, along with the improved two-tone luminescence and the updated Seiko logo arrangement. In terms of quality, the strap is a huge step up too. This nylon leather hybrid is just leagues better than the scratchy bands adorning the last gen originals, and it should be far more durable, which is much appreciated. Unlike the SNK 800 series that inspired it, this refresh actually has good aquatic performance at 10 bar, though frustratingly doesn't improve upon the Hardlex crystal, but it's at least stylishly domed this time around. Size-wise, it sits bang in the middle of those previous two at a palatable 39.4mm with a 47.7mm lug-to-lug and a 13.2mm thickness, which includes that crystal. Again, it comes in a few colours. I've also looked at the green one before now, the SRP-H29, though I think this blue looks nicer in the flesh. Now, unfortunately, all these upgrades, they do come at a cost, as the SRP-H commands an RRP far exceeding the previous two watches, or at least the sale price when they were still in production. With those older two increasing in cost due to the restricted supply, I just get this SRP-H instead every day of the week. It's a much better watch overall. Another quirky route to go down is the SKA 791. This pilot-inspired watch is part of the unique Kinetic range, which uses an automatic-like rotor to help charge a lithium-ion battery inside. It's effectively a different type of hybrid quartz movement that gets recharged whenever you move. Interestingly, it's usually an identical cell to that used in Citizen's EcoDrive solar range. And that pusher, well, that tells you how much power it's got left. It's a cool piece of engineering, and while not as impressive as a high-end mechanical piece, it is much more accurate and exclusive. Visually, the rest of the SKA 791 is also quite individual, with a bright green face, gold accents, and an unusually proportioned fixed bezel. The case finishing overall is decent, and the strap is serviceable too. It's just worth noting that the watch is pretty large, at 42.5mm, so this is really reserved for those willing to accommodate a larger timepiece. My favourite part of this one is the super silky section that encompasses the hour markers. You'll notice that that area has an extra shiny green that combines pleasingly with the main central sunburst. Overall, it's far from my favourite in terms of looks, but it's undoubtedly a sleeper pick if it suits your wrist and taste. Did you know Seiko also makes titanium watches? Titanium watches that don't cost a fortune. Yes, after the discontinuation of the retro-styled SNDC 31, I was looking for an alternative chronograph worth recommending, and I found this, the SSB 387. Usually available for under $400 at the time of recording, this little-known gem brings one of the deepest dials on the market, with 2-tier subdials, a 2-step chapter ring with protruding markers, and a carbon fiber-like surface underneath. It's not actually carbon fiber, it just looks a bit like it. The colour of this blue version is duller than on many of the oversaturated stock images, with more of a navy tone in reality, though you can also purchase this watch in black, which I think probably looks better. There's also a different version of this chronograph, which I wasn't able to get at the time of recording, but I'll link it below just in case because it looks pretty similar. Despite the rather large proportions, this one weighs virtually nothing due to the titanium case and bracelet, making it so comfortable you'll forget it's even there. Inside is an 8T67 Mecha Quartz movement, which provides more satisfying pushers and a quicker reset time than most regular quartz chronos. It also enables somewhat of a sweep on the chronograph hand as well. You can basically get these movements in far lower cost watches, but not many options combine this alongside the materials and intricacy you can see here. My main gripe is regarding the bracelet. It integrates with the case poorly, let's be honest. Those end links, they look far too small. Also, the clasp has a pitiful number of micro adjustment holes considering the huge link size. Therefore, you'll probably want to try a third-party strap with the SSB 387. If you aren't bothered by this, it at least incorporates Seiko's newer link removal system, which is very quick and convenient. If you don't fancy that chronograph, some of the SUR dress watches that I mentioned earlier do actually come in titanium versions as well, and they're without a substantial price increase over the steel versions, so I'll try and find some and link them below as well. For more Japanese wristwatch suggestions, check out the video on screen now where I went through my top 20 Casios. That video took almost as long as this one did to make. And don't forget Daily Watch either, they're linked down below.